How's it going, everybody? Zander Fryer back here for another episode of Shit You Don't Learn in College. And today on the SYDLIC podcast, I have the pleasure of interviewing Joel Marion, six-time best-selling author and host of the Born to Impact podcast with over 1.4 million followers on social. Joel built a $100 million supplement company in less than 12 months and now also has a $10 million personal brand. But before all of this, he was just a PE teacher struggling paycheck to paycheck. This episode was filled with so many knowledge bites that we actually had to break it up into two episodes. So in the first episode, we dig into how rejection helped build Joel as a person. Over 3 years of rejection helped build Joel as a person, something he calls the plateau of latent potential. How one connection made him his first seven figures, how to deal with people around you who want to hold you down as you go for more, and how he made his first 100K in 3 days in online sales, and the importance of masterminds. In the second episode, we dig deeper into things like how to get connected to people to fast track your success, how one email he sent literally saved somebody's life, how religion is killing faith and spirituality, and why millionaires still suffer from imposter syndrome and everything that you think money should solve. You're not going to want to miss this episode. And don't forget, we only spread our message when you share this knowledge with others that need it. So if you enjoy this episode, please share it on your social media and tag @ZanderFryer. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and give us 5 stars so you don't miss another great episode. I'll see you in there. All right. How's it going, everybody? Zander Fryer, and we are back here for another episode of Shit You Don't Learn in College. And today we are going to be interviewing the Michael Jordan of email marketing. He's a lot more than just the Michael Jordan of email marketing. But Joel Marion is the co-founder of BioTrust Nutrition with Josh Bazzoni, one of the fastest growing supplement companies in America. They took BioTrust from 0 to 100 million in under a year. And now they've sold over $600 million from that supplement company. He's a 6-time best-selling author with over 20 million email subscribers, 1.4 million IG followers. And on top of that, Joel is also the host for the top-ranked podcast Born to Impact and is dedicated to his mission of helping over 100 million people all over the world find their purpose and life, the life they were born to live. So welcome to the show, Joel Marion. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Excited to have this conversation and serve your audience.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Great to have you. As I'm like reading through that, and I've known you for a bit now, I just realized like Joel doesn't do anything small. Like, has that always been a thing of yours? Like, I'm reading like 20 million subscribers, $100 million in 12 months. Like, has that just always been how you operate?
Well, yes and no. I've always tried anything that I've ever done. I try to give it everything that I have.
Yeah.
Unfortunately or fortunately, because a lot of lessons learned, not everything that I do works right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So the beginning of my career, while I was trying as hard as I could, there wasn't much to speak of in the way of tangible results, So one of the things that I just want to encourage people, when you hear these big numbers, I just interviewed my friend Jamie Kern-Lima, who's the founder of a makeup company called It Cosmetics, who got turned down by every person she approached, every outlet. She tried to get on QVC, was basically told over and over again for 3 years that she would never be a good fit for QVC. And that's the same kind of my story when I started off writing in the fitness industry. I had article after article after article rejected. So now I can say I have thousands of articles published, and they say, "Joel, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
You don't do anything small." But like at the beginning, I had zero for a long time. Like the first year of me trying to be published in magazines was 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So it doesn't get any smaller than zero. So I just want to encourage people that you may be in that season of your life where things don't seem like they're happening, or despite the fact that you're going all out, you're not getting a lot of tangible results. But stay the course. I've never seen anybody who persevered and remained patient and did everything they could to make something happen and then never get there. In Jamie's case, the company It Cosmetics, who she started in her living room. And for 3 years, after 3 years, she was almost bankrupt.
Yeah.
She, and then fast forward some years later, not even that many after that, maybe 5 or 6 years later, sold the company for $1.2 billion to L'Oreal and became the first female CEO in L'Oreal's 100-year history to own
Jeez.
a L'Oreal acquired brand. So she also was told by QVC for 3 years straight that she's not a good fit. She would never be a good fit, and that her line was just not for QVC. To the point that the head guy at QVC called her. She like got dressed up, even though it was a phone call back then. She got dressed up, put her perfume on, all this stuff. She was just so excited because there's no way in the world that the head of QVC was going to call her to tell her no. He would just email her if it was going to be a no, right? But he did call her and said, "Listen, we appreciate your tenacity. You keep sending us stuff and samples and everything. I just wanted you to hear it from the very top, not via email, but on the phone, that you don't need to send any more samples. You don't need to write in ever again. It's not a good fit. It's not going to be a good fit."
Never gonna happen.
Right, exactly. That's QVC. She is the number one selling product line on QVC of all time. Okay, any category, not just makeup, any and every category. She went from catching a break a year and a half later for a 10-minute segment, which led to 5 segments that year, which led to 50 segments the next year, to 100 the next year, and then for 3 years straight, she did every single business day. She was live on QVC, 250 days a year, and
That's
became and this is for somebody who for 3.5 years got no results. If after the first year, most people after a few months are going to give up. If after 6 months or a year or 2 years,
do you think there's some like tie to that correlation, like how much rejection you are willing to take with how much success you end up getting?
1,000%, simply because most people's tolerance for rejection is very low.
Yeah.
They think that somebody tells me no a few times and then someone else tells me no. I mean, this woman was told no by everyone she approached.
Yeah.
She was approaching all the name, Ulta, and even try to get her products in convenience stores and like Walgreens and pharmacies and stuff like that. No, no, no. QVC, no. Every outlet she tried to get into wasn't working. And for most people, they're going to hear 1 no, 2 no's, maybe 3, and then they're like, all right, I guess it just wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah.
And for me, I came from a background being a high school teacher. When I graduated college, I went into teaching kids, health and physical education. Okay, so I was a PE teacher, and I knew that was a temporary gig for me, and that I was.
Let's pause this right now. So
Yeah.
everybody that knocks on PE teachers, right? Like this is a former PE teacher who now has millions of followers, $100 million companies. So PE teachers, they're getting a bad rap, but continue.
Yeah, well, it's all about. It's not where you start. It's where your journey takes you, and ultimately where you finish, right? And that was the start of my career. Now, I double majored in health and exercise science and health and physical education. It was actually my father who said he was looking up. I remember to this day when I told him I'm doing exercise. I'm majoring in exercise science because I want to get into personal training.
Yeah.
And he said, pulled a newspaper article out that had like a whole half the top of the newspaper was like 100 different professions and how much money they made per year.
Yeah.
And the average personal trainer income was $12,000 a year. Okay. And he said, you're going to go to college and you're spending all this money and your mom is spending all this money to send you to school. And you're going to get into a career where the average income is $12,000 a year. And he's like, I drive buses for a living. I make more than that, So he's like, I'm not even college educated. So he's like, why are you doing all this? At least, get your teaching track as well. So I listened to him, and I always knew that personal training wasn't going to be just like, I'm not just going to be a trainer at Gold's Gym or something. I'm actually going to try to own my own business and have my own studio or whatever it was that I was going to be doing on my own at the time. And my real passion was I wanted to be an author. But I started off teaching. In those first 3 to 4 years that I was teaching is when I tried to get my writing career off the ground. And again, it was not easy at first. It was small win a lot of no's, small win, a lot more no's, and
Yeah.
then
And
a
this was
couple.
just trying to get like articles published, or was this?
Right. So my dream was to be an author. At 19
Yeah.
years old, I found a So I was an athlete growing up.
Yeah.
I played basketball. I lived, slept, ate basketball. That's what I did. Um, love the sport, still do. But it came time that we had a nationally ranked team. We were ranked higher in the state. We were even nationally ranked. Very competitive parochial school that was competing in the Catholic leagues and such. Now, I knew, even though I started on the team, I was probably the fifth best player, or maybe not
Yeah.
even at my position. I just happened to be the best player, right?
Yeah.
So I started, but I knew that I wasn't going to go on and make a professional career out of it. I had to get realistic. I could have went and played like Division III college basketball and spent a bunch of time continuing to carry that on. But I said, this is graduating high school. Let me go to school where not by where I can play basketball, but what's going to be best academically for
For
the
you
rest of my
longer
life.
term. Yeah.
Right, for a longer term, right. So I hung up my basketball shoes, my sneakers, and I wanted to replace that with something. So I got really heavy into health and fitness. And just like in business, I sucked at it at first. I was spending 2 hours. I spent 2 hours in the gym. I did a 2 hour chest workout. Which was
Yeah.
consisted of incline, decline, flat bench, and then you go over the cable pulleys and do the same thing, and then you get the dumbbells do the same thing. It was just I had no clue what I was doing until I educated myself. But I stumbled upon a guy named Bill Phillips. Bill Phillips ran a supplement company called EAS, stood for Experimental and Applied Science, and he also ran a very popular magazine called Muscle Media, and at the time he had a blockbuster book out called Body for Life, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for a couple years straight. I was introduced to that book by one of my professors at school, and then that turned me on to the magazine, and I kind of really got
Yeah.
really passionate about supplements and the health and fitness stuff. And then I started learning, and then I read the book Body for Life. I started to stop wasting my time in the gym to doing more productive workouts. I got my nutrition dialed in, and I end up winning. They have a huge body transformation contest that was global, that had over 200,000 people who would enter it every year. Before and after contest, 12 weeks to see how much change you can make in 12 weeks. So I entered that as a 19-year-old, and I end up winning that contest for my age and my gender, male, 18 to 25 years old. Now, you said earlier, Joel, it seems like you don't do anything halfway, and the answer to that is it's go big or go home is my
Yeah.
philosophy. When I entered the contest, I told all my friends at the time, I said, I'm going to enter this thing, and I'm going to win. Like, I'm taking this
Yeah.
more serious than anything that I've ever taken in my life. So I did. That ended up becoming a reality. Everyone, I think, originally, although they were my friends and they supported me, were kind of like rolled their eyes at the idea that, you're going to go win this contest.
Oh
But
man, another crazy one from Joel. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I won the contest, and that got my foot in the door to writing for the magazine Muscle Media.
Nice.
But even then, that wasn't enough, because then I was like, oh, well, let me try and write for Men's Health. Let me write for Men's Fitness. Let me try to get into some of these women's magazines. And because of my relationship with Muscle Media, I got a couple articles published. But then when I tried to, you know, get into these other magazines, my articles kept getting rejected. And I had to learn real quick that my writing wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
The editor was heavily editing my stuff at Muscle Media, and because I was a champion of the contest, I resonated with the audience, so they
Yeah.
gave me a pass on my writing. But then I had to start learning how can I improve my writing and asking for feedback from editors.
I think
For,
that's really important though, right? Like you had to accept that you weren't good enough. A lot of people like, especially in the self-development space, everybody goes like, you are good enough. You're
right,
you're good enough just the way you're. And I'm like, no, you're not. Right?
right.
Like
I
accept that
mean,
you're not good enough.
so
Yeah.
for Born to Impact, we have 5 pillars of impact. The first one is passion. I was very passionate about health and fitness. The second one is proficiency,
Yeah.
which basically says that unless you're good at what you're passionate about, you're not going to get paid on it. So
Yeah.
it's you can be passionate all day, but you're going to have very little impact if you don't
You
have
you gotta
proficiency,
you gotta
right?
get good at some point. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And for some people, they go and say, I'm really passionate about music, but they're terrible singers. And unless they really work on that, there's probably not going to be a career there. Or they can pivot and say, hey, I'm really passionate about music. Let's be realistic. I'm not a good singer. Maybe I can get involved in the music industry in some other way.
It's
Maybe I
so
can be
funny
on
you
the
bring
tech
that up.
side or
Yeah,
whatever.
like one of my we just interviewed the guy who produced Harry Styles' solo album, right? And he was talking about like I'm actually not the best musically inclined person, but I'm really good with people. And because of that, like I love music and I was able to like create space for people like Harry Styles and Young the Giant to produce their best work.
Right.
Right? It's the same idea. They found that thing that they do have
Right.
proficiency in to really support.
Right, and exactly. You say, "Hey, what am I good at, and how can I plug myself into what I'm passionate about by using some of my strengths?" And for me, I was a pretty good writer, but I didn't have in some ways, but I didn't have the formula that these magazines were looking for. And when it came to the topics that they were looking for, the way that a health and fitness article was written for a mainstream magazine versus what I was writing, which was more sciencey and a little too academic for that type of
Yeah.
audience, I had to make adjustments and learn what the editors wanted. But what was interesting is I asked for feedback from the editors, and they gladly gave it to me. Some of them very bluntly, but they appreciated that I asked, because most people have the opinion that, like these self-help things, like, hey, this was really good. I don't know why you wouldn't want to publish it. Instead of saying, hey, what could I have done better? How can I make this more of what you're looking for? They went and, most people would just say, hey, this is really good. I submitted all these articles. They're awesome articles. People don't get it. They don't understand my art,
Yeah.
and the next thing you know, it's just like, well, I guess I'll just keep doing this for myself, but I'm never going to have, get into those magazines that I want to. And instead, you have to say, hey, who is the decision maker and what do they want?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're catering things to what you think, everyone is going to want, and then the market speaks something different, or the gatekeeper speaks something different, you're never going to have big impact or a lot of success, because you got to get your foot in the door and then you got to
Yeah.
bust through the door.
Yeah, and
So,
you gotta pay attention to what it is that people want. Like Matthew McConaughey says, not all self-expression is art, right?
right.
If it's not connecting with somebody on the other side, just because you're expressing something doesn't make it artistic. Like if it's not connecting with anybody, so you need to be aware about the other side.
Or at least it's not art that anyone cares about. Sure, it
That
may
yeah,
have
that anybody cares about.
it may have some artistic component because it comes from you. But hey, if you're trying to monetize it, or if you're trying to have a career or put food on the table with it, it's going to have to resonate with somebody else, or they're going to open up their wallet and spend some money.
Yep. I love that. So you're obviously getting into these a handful of these different media spaces with your articles.
Hmm.
I really want to dig into that a little bit because this is now the beginning days of like, okay, Joel's thinking about really going for his business, but you said you spent about 3 or 4 years of like really trying to get published
Uh,
before you really.
Correct. So it was really from in the beginning when I was a teacher, I was still trying to get articles published and become an author, so to speak. And the
Yeah,
end goal was get articles published and then move on to books. So
yeah.
I did get a handful of articles published, and then a lot of articles published to the point where I probably had 100 articles published before I
Yeah.
decided to write a book.
Was a lot of that just because you were getting feedback from people consistently, like getting better?
Here's the thing. This is so many people quit because they don't spend enough time, and it seems that this is not the path to success. Okay, it's not a
Yeah,
linear thing.
it's not just a line. Yeah.
Right. It's generally speaking, it's like this. It's going to come. It's going to suck. You may even go down some, and then it's going to finally come and level off, and then you're going to catch a break. It's going to go up. Then it'll probably go back down for a little while, and then you catch another couple breaks, and then next thing you know, it's like you got that momentum to where boom, it starts to take off, right?
Yeah. We
And
call it
for
the
me,
hockey stick moment, right? It's like all of a sudden you just angle straight up. Yeah.
yeah, my friend James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, references it as the plateau of latent potential, which simply
Yeah.
means that you're going to keep going on something. It's going to seem like nothing's happening, but you're creating momentum and you're getting past the inertia phase. And then once that ball starts rolling, it picks up speed. And then what what once took, you know, um, maybe a year can now happen in a week, right?
Yeah.
So for me to get my first article published, maybe it took 6 months, and then to get 5 articles published, it took over a year. But then I was getting 5 articles published a week easily, right? Because
Yeah.
I had the relationships. I was in this magazine, that magazine. Then I was getting referred out to something else. Then I could show a portfolio to people when I pitched to be in their magazine and say, "Hey, look at these 20 articles. I've had this article on men's health. I had this article here," and it's so much easier to get published because I had that momentum on my side. So that is something to think about. Well, another analogy that I often give is the analogy, and James Clear gives this as well, the analogy of the stonecutter, where you just think old school, someone, the job is to cut this cement slab in two, right? Or this big stone, and so they can do, some construction work or whatever. And they're, pounding down this hammer over and over again. And maybe they wail on this thing, and they hit 40 times, 50 times, 67 times, 78 times, and nothing has happened.
It
Literally.
looks
It's like,
exactly the same.
it
Yeah.
looks exactly the same. Exactly. And then boom, wails down on maybe the 95th blow, and the whole stone cracks in two.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that he just magically hit it in the best possible spot on that 95th time to where it broke in two? No, it was the compounding effort when it looked like nothing was happening, over and over and over again, and then boom, breakthrough happens, and you can then move forward with lots of momentum. So I just want to encourage people again, and I shared this kind of in the beginning. If you don't see a lot happening, keep going, because you could be a lot closer to a breakthrough than you realize. Now, after having all those hundreds of articles published, I went and or maybe I think it was around 100 articles published. I went and started to write a book. Then I
Yeah.
came up against a whole new set of obstacles. I'm like, man, I'm getting pretty good at this article. Then I got article here, article there. And then it was like, hey, I need to land a book agent now. That was before I'm writing a book. I need to land a book agent. And then after I
Yep.
get an agent, then I got to get a book deal with a publisher, right? But the first obstacle was to get an agent. I had 6 different agents who rejected my book. And there wasn't quick rejections either. These were follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up.
Like
Hey, I should be able
you're putting
to.
time and energy into this.
Right,
This
right,
isn't like
yeah.
yeah.
Like I should be able to get to it next week. And the way the publishing industry works is people don't want, the agents do not like when you do mass submissions, meaning, hey, I'm going to submit this work to all these different agents at once. And then if 2 people come back or 3 people come back and say, hey, I'd love to represent it, and you say, oh, crap, I got to choose only one, and then tell the other
Yeah.
guys no, then that gets around. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this guy wasted my time. I spent all this time reviewing his proposal, and then I got back to him with a yes, and then he said, oh, hey, I already went and got somebody else. So the method here is unfortunately slow, where it's submit to one and wait to hear. Now, if I wasn't hearing back from somebody at all, different story, but I would hear received it. We'll find time to review it.
Yeah.
Your initial bio. I'll give it the time. But it would take sometimes a month for guys to get back to me, and with a no. So
Yeah.
over a period of about 6 months, still have not had an agent. Okay, I had this book half written, but I still did not have an agent. I was getting ready to just say, screw it, I'm going to mass submit. I don't care if I hurt somebody's feelings,
Yeah.
because it's just too slow of a process, to where I reached back out to an editor of Men's Health, and Lou Schuler, and I said, Lou, I'm struggling. I went to this agent and this agent, and here's the people I've been in contact with. Do you know anyone else who is in the health and fitness diet space who I can talk to, or you have a referral for a book agent that you think would be worthwhile for me to reach out to? And he said, well, a few of the names that I would have mentioned to you, you already went to. He's like, I have heard this other guy's name. I don't know him personally, but here's a name. He literally just gave me a name.
Yeah.
Okay, that was all I got. So I had to go and do some detective work, and I used like the Wayback Machine. Wayback Machine is like, we'll bring up old web pages, right?
Yeah.
It will show the stuff that's not even live on the internet anymore. And because I could not find a way to contact this guy I found his agency, but I couldn't find a way to contact him directly, right? There's only on the agency, it was a huge agency, William Morris agency. It's a huge talent agency who represents actors and all kinds of talent, people on Broadway as well as authors. So I found the agency, but I couldn't find any way to contact him directly, just as a general inquiry thing. And I'm like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to get back to me. I fill out this support support at WMA, right? So I did some detective work, found an old webpage who I saw that it was him, and he was like in his early days as a book agent, right? Before
Yeah.
he was working for William Morris. And he had, I found his AOL email address, his personal email. And I emailed the guy and I said, listen, I'm getting ready to mass submit this. I've talked with this person. They liked it, but they had a conflict with another client. And, so it's names that he was familiar with who didn't outright say the book sucked, who just said, right now I can't bring it on. So-and-so didn't have the bandwidth. So-and-so had a conflict of interest with another client. But this is good stuff. If you're interested, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to mass submit. And he said, hold off. I'll take a look at it this weekend. Took a look at it this weekend. On Monday, he said, I'd love to represent the project. I signed a contract for him to represent me on Monday. On Wednesday, we had a meeting with a publisher in New York. And on Thursday, someone bought the book for $100,000. Okay.
Jeez.
Now, this was in 6 months of me going nowhere. And then 5 days later, I had a book deal for
in 72 hours. Yeah.
Right. I went from not even having an agent to not only having an agent, but then having a book deal with a check that was being written. Right. Okay. Yeah. Literally in less than a week. So again, same story as before. The plateau of latent potential. It's nothing's happening, and then boom, big things happen. Right now. Here I am with $100,000 in my pocket. I'm a 25-year-old guy and still a kid, honestly. Yep. And there's a lot of money for me. And I thought, like, hey, this book is going to crush. I already know this is an amazing concept. The book was called The Cheat to Lose Diet. I teach people how to use cheat meals to interact with their hormones to help them burn fat faster. So all these South Beach diet was the big diet at the time, right? Yeah. And I'm like, who wouldn't want to do this diet over South Beach? Like, it's just, you can't have pie or cake or donuts or ice cream or whatever on South Beach. It's not even part of the program. But once a week, I had this and I had all this stuff incorporated. And it was just a winning concept. However, I didn't understand that you need to be able to market this to people.
Just because you have a good product does not mean that people are going to buy it. Yeah.
Exactly. How was I going to get this out there? And I took for granted at the time that big publisher, which it was, Random House, big publisher, division of Random House. Big publisher, they're going to get me on all these shows, on Dr. Oz and on the news and Good Morning America. And then the book will just take off because it's a winning concept. Well, I was a relatively new developing author. It was my first book. And there wasn't all these people who wanted to take me on their show. Yeah. So when the book ended up coming out, it bombed. Like literally, they paid me $100,000, which I think at $3 a book royalty, I had to sell 33,000 books for me to earn out that event. Yeah. I only sold like all time, even to this day, like 7,000 copies of the book, maybe. Yeah. And the first, when it launched, it sold a few thousand copies, and then it's been only probably because of who I am at this point did we ever reach 7,000.
Probably from a couple of podcasts like this that you actually sold the 7,000. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So the book flopped. I knew I was not earning any additional royalties because I was under the false impression that the book was going to get big. I had already spent all the money. I'm 25 years old. I'm like, oh, this is the beginning of me becoming, relatively wealthy. And I'm going to go to a bunch of sporting events. I'm going to sit a lot closer than I was used to.
You're going to live the dream for a bit. Yeah.
Right. And I did for like 6 months before the book came out. And then I realized that, this was not going to be the game changer for me that I hoped it was going to be. I wanted to be, a New York Times bestselling author, have multiple books, come out with sequels, create a franchise around Cheat You Right Then. Cheat to Lose Diet, and learned very quickly I didn't have a direct audience. I didn't have people to sell the book to. I couldn't market. I needed a bigger platform. And then I knew some guys who I was writing for the magazines with who had online information products. So they were selling their own courses, DVDs, ebooks, and stuff like that.
What year is this at this point?
This was 2008.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So this is 13 years ago. So I was faced with the reality of I'm going to have to go back to teaching, or I'm going to figure out Plan B. and I was
Yeah.
not about going back to teaching. However, I had to go back to teaching that year
Yeah.
because I needed the money. I was literally running out of money. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm not going to be able to pay my car payment. So
Yeah.
I,
And I want to pause on that for a second too, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that, misstep their first one or two or even three times, right? Like, there's stories of like Henry Ford going bankrupt a couple of times before he actually got, the Model T going and things like that. But I do want to point out for any entrepreneurs that are listening, right? Like, you had to go back to teaching again. Like, you had to do that one thing that like broke your heart to go back to it,
yeah,
right?
especially when, and I was embarrassed. The book came out and I was embarrassed because I had been talking about it and excited about it,
Yeah.
and everyone knew I got this big advance. And then the book came out, and everyone's looking at the bestseller list and like, "Oh,
Where is it?
so right,
Yeah.
yeah. Where's the book at?" And then I'm like, "Yeah, I'm like, I had to sell probably 15,000, like 8 times the amount of books I sold to even be on the list for 1 week, right? Let alone
Yeah.
multiple weeks." So I went into a pretty deep depression for about 6 months before I like almost completely ran out of money, and the school year was starting.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to like address the situation with my friends and my family because, and I think they just didn't talk about it and they left it alone because they knew, that I was disappointed by it. But I, it was a low point for me, and then it was going back to teaching, and now I got to like here I am. Number one, my hopes were way high.
Yeah.
And then everyone else was like, "Oh, Joel's about to be living the dream," and then here he is. He said all this stuff. A lot of people probably bought into it because I won the contest and all this other stuff that I was
Yeah.
doing and got into the magazines. But then I think some people were like, "Yeah, they felt better about themselves because Joel couldn't pull it
Yeah.
off, and I feel okay staying in my job and not." Because when if you're somebody who is actually trying to go make it out there, trying
Yeah.
to become successful, trying to live a better life, create a better life for you and your family and what have you. The people who are around you who just simply don't have that drive or ambition or gave up on that drive or ambition at some point are going to start, most of them are going to start having this jealousy, whether they ever directly state it or not. People in your circle, including family and friends who you're close with, they don't want to see you doing better than them.
Yeah. It's
Because
it's just
it's a
it's their
self
own.
check for them.
Yeah, it's
It's
their own fears and limiting beliefs. Like, it
right,
makes me worse if like Joel can actually dare and go do this thing and I can't. Right?
right. And then it's just it's like, well, if he can do it, and I gave up on that dream, then it makes them feel like, they should be trying harder, but they don't really want to try harder, So
Because it takes
it's
work. Because it's
right,
hard.
right, exactly. So they get conflicted. But anyway, here I had to go back to teaching, embarrassed about it, but and especially because I took the year off from teaching when I went to do my book. So everyone
Yeah.
at school, all the
Not only
teachers in
not
the
only did you
department,
take not only did you take the year off, you spent it hanging out at sporting events
right,
and doing
right,
all the cool shit.
right. And then here it is. I got to come back. I got to face all the teachers in the department that I was with, and they're like, "Hey, what happened with that book?" And then I got to talk about this thing that I'm like loathing talking about. So
Yeah.
again, I saw these other guys who were making um, a few $1,000s a month extra selling information products.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, if these guys who have their own personal training studios and stuff, who are successful trainers, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an author.
Yep.
But if they're on the side selling programs and stuff like that online and making 2-3 grand a month, if I really put my heart and soul into all of that, and I don't have the distraction of trying to run a studio, I should be able to make 10 grand a month on that,
Yep.
and then that's a way better income than I'm making teaching. So that'd be super dope. So I started to learn how to create a platform, how to create an email list, how to do online marketing. The term direct response was very foreign to me at the time, but it's like, how do I get people to my website? How do I show them an irresistible offer, get them to take out their wallet and spend money with me,
Yep.
right? So the very first thing I decided to do was launch a high ticket coaching program, which was a relatively high ticket for health and fitness. It's $250 a month to
Yeah.
train with Joel online. It was like, hey, why go to your local Lifestyle Fitness or your local Gold's Gym and train with a trainer who may or may not know what they're doing, and that's going to cost you, let's do $60 an hour times 3 sessions a week. So it's going to cost you $700-800 a month. When you could train with somebody who has, look at my track record,
Yeah.
look what I did with my own body transformation, look at all these publications that I've been in, right? So I had an email list of about 2,000 people because I did have a website, although the website was absolutely terrible. And all the way back in 2008, this is when people still like signed up for newsletters, free newsletter.
Yeah.
That's not happening anymore because people get way too much email. But the people who knew me from the online publications that I was writing for would migrate over to, always at the bottom of an article I wrote, there was a link back to my website.
Yep.
So they came back. I think the website was joelmarion.net at the time, and now I own joelmarion.com. But I didn't own it at the time. It was like too expensive. It was $2,000 for me to buy it. I couldn't afford it. So I got the .net. So people came to joelmarion.net, and there was a little box up in the corner that said free newsletter. And I had about, over the years of me writing articles, I had about 2,000 people who signed up for that.
Yeah.
I never sent one email out, ever. I didn't have a software that sent email. I just had a collection of emails, and I figured, eventually I'll figure out how I send these emails out. I can't just blind copy and paste everybody, right? Or blind copy everybody on an email and send it through my Gmail account. That won't work. It's too many email addresses. I actually learned that because I tried to do it with the first 500, and they all started bouncing back. So then I contacted the person who was doing my web hosting, my $30 a month web hosting, and said, how do I send these emails? And they're like, oh, you need an ESP, an email service provider.
Yeah.
And they directed me to a website. I'm like, dude, this is like $50 a month. I don't have $50 a month to like send emails. That's like my cell phone bill at the time. So he's like, well, if you can make more money than $50 by communicating with your audience, then you should be fine. And I said, I'm not sure I can do that or not, but let's give it a try for a couple months. So I had 2,000 names. Fortunately, they were like my best fans, even though I didn't ever contact them before. They were the people who loved my articles, looked forward to reading my articles and all that. Built over a period of a couple years. And I built this webpage. I learned copywriting from a guy named Yannick Silver. Yannick had a course called the Ultimate Copywriting Workshop. Okay, I learned about Yannick Silver through another individual who taught people how to sell health and fitness products online. His name was Ryan Lee. Ryan Lee referred me through an affiliate link, which I started learning about affiliate commissions because I bought through Ryan, and then I was like, he got part of my payment or whatever. Actually, no, I didn't buy through Ryan. I did learn about him through an affiliate link, but I ended up buying the course on eBay at a massive discount. It was a $2,000 workshop with keeping binders and DVDs and all this stuff, and I ended up getting it on eBay for like $250. I'm like, dude, this is like, I can invest $2,000 too steep for me. But I found the same course on eBay, and somebody shipped me a huge box with all these binders and all this crap, and I got them. I listened to the audio CDs in my car as I drove back and forth from work, or if I was driving to a friend's house or whatever. Absorbed all the information, and more than anything, I studied. And this is the best teacher that you can get. I listened to the audio, but like, how are you going to just listen to audios and learn copyright? You got to have have more hands on than that. And I was a good writer, but I didn't understand sales copy. So what I did was I was just like, man, I read this whole long form sales letter by Yannick Silver. I wanted to spend $2,000.
And I bought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to spend $2,000, and then I researched and found it. But man, I really wanted to spend that $2,000. If I had it, I would have spent it. Right. So whatever he did here is working. Yeah. And then I started to learn from other guys like Frank Kern and Jeff Walker about product launches and all this stuff. And I wrote my first sales letter. I modeled one of Yannick's things for a coaching program that he had. And I wrote this sales letter that when somebody landed on joelmarion.net, now my homepage was just a sales letter for coaching. That's it. Yeah. And then I emailed that to that list of 2,000 people. And it was a 4-email sequence. Mm-hmm. The first email went out, and I think I got 8 people to sign up.
Yeah.
through a PayPal link. Had no merchant account or nothing. It was a PayPal link to pay me $250 on a subscription. It was a 4-month minimum, and I had all these reasons why. Yay, like I'm not going to be committed to you unless you're committed to me, and it's going to need to be 4 months. So you're not going to see your body change overnight, and I don't have the time to invest in onboarding you if you're going to just quit after a week. So it's a 4-month minimum. So so if you're a quitter, don't apply. And
Yeah.
and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm not a quitter." It's like, so yeah, 4 months, I'm on board. So they were on an auto subscription through a PayPal link for $250 a month, and I had 8 people to sign up with the first email. So I'm like, let me do the math on this. It's $1,000 a person, 4 months times 250 times 8 people. I just made $8,000 by sending one email, and I'm worried about the $50 that I had to pay to send,
Yeah.
for the software for the month, right? So I send this 4 email sequence. The last one was a deadline email, and like, holy crap, like double the amount of people came in on the last email.
Yeah.
And I had 50 people now,
Oh,
50
wow.
people that were paying me $250 a month, and I'm like, dude, I'm making $12,000 a month now, and look, yep, trumped my teacher salary by a long shot. Then I said, well, I want to do something that's more scalable than this coaching because I still got to like work hands on kind of
Yeah.
with all these people. Then I'm gonna create an ebook where I can just sell a course. So I said, I already know my concept is really great with cheat to lose diet. So I'm gonna
Right.
change the name to Cheat Your Way Thin. I can't use it word for word because the
Because it's
the,
copyright. Yeah.
the publisher's copyright has the copyright to it. I did own the audio rights because we never sold the audio rights. We wanted to withhold them for some reason. My agent told me that, right? So I didn't sell the audio. So what I did was I took certain chapters and I created MP3 audios out of them. I just read the chapters. And I said, you're going to get 8 modules. 4 of them are PDF, 4 of them are audio, and 2 of them are video. And the video ones were just me reading chapters, but on Camtasia video with this PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
And the other ones, I just summarized the program. I just literally, they were like, what to do, without all
Yeah.
the fluff and all the other stuff that has to be in a 250-page book. So I put together this course. I wrote another sales letter for it. In the meantime, I started to network with other people who I knew were power players in the internet marketing, online health and fitness space. And this is what I did. I heard about this marketplace, or this, where you would sell ebooks on this platform called ClickBank.
Yeah.
And when you go to ClickBank, there's a place that kind of is like a bestseller list for ClickBank called the Marketplace. Clicked to the Marketplace, went to the health and fitness category, and then I saw the first 20 listings of all the products and who the authors were. And I said, man, these guys got to figure out. These are all the best sellers for ebooks.
Yeah.
So right at the top of the list, the number one guy was his name Mike Geary, and his product was Truth About Apps. Okay, he was the number one
Yeah.
listing. Then there was like Vince Del Monte and Craig Ballantyne with turbulence training, and Vince Del Monte with his skinny guy stuff and no
Yeah.
nonsense muscle building, and then Tom Venuto with his Burn the Fat program. And I printed off the top 20, and I said, I'm going to become friends one way or another with all 20 of these people
Yeah.
in the next year before I launch my ebook, and they're all going to promote my ebook. Rob
Yeah.
Pulhos was on there. He had one of the top ranked programs, and Isabel De Los Rios with Beyond Diet, who's
Yeah.
now she pays me $100,000 to
I
be
was
her
gonna say
coach, right?
that's a pretty all-star list that you have
Right.
there.
So, fortunately, most of these people, if not, all of them, are still very relevant and have grown amazing businesses above and beyond where they were
Yeah.
at that time. John Benson was on there, and he's an all-star copywriter. But anyway, I printed off the list. I had it next to my computer, and these are the people that I was going to tackle one by one. Kind of one of those unique situations where I reached out to Mike Geary's help desk. I said, "Hi, my name is Joel Marion. I'm on the training advisory team at Men's Fitness. I would love to interview Mike for the magazine. I'd also love to review his book, Truth About Abs, and write up an expert testimonial." So that got forwarded from his help desk to him. He said,
Yeah.
"Sure, I'll do that. It sounds cool." And sent me a copy of the book. I wrote a nice testimonial for it. So I was providing value, right? I didn't ask him
Yeah.
for
You were
anything. I
you
was
were
like, "Hey,
bringing
show me
value.
how you sell all these ebooks." I was just like, let me provide value.
Tell me your secrets.
Right. I'd use what I had, at that point I had a connection with a magazine that I could use, and
Yep.
you might have something different. It might be graphic design or whatever. I had a guy who created a relationship with me fairly recently. A couple years ago, my podcast started, a podcast listener. He said, "Hey, I saw the bottle images on your website for your supplements. I'm actually a graphic designer. I ordered some of your products. I did like a professional photo shoot with it, and I got a bunch of images for you that you can use however you want in your marketing." And they
Yeah.
were like
It's
really,
yours.
really high quality, badass bottle images of our products. And I'm like, dude, this is way better than what's on our website. I'm like, so this is great. So I said, hey,
And he went and did it
yeah,
on his own time,
on his own time and on his own dollar.
on
He
his own
bought the
dollar.
products. He didn't contact and said, "Hey, send me some product and then I'll shoot it for you." He just literally
Yeah.
went and bought the product. Didn't say anything to anybody until it was done. Then
Yeah.
he contacted me, and he didn't even know if he was going to be able to get in contact with me because he had
Yeah.
never talked to me before that. So he literally found a way to get me through Instagram DM. I saw his message. I saw his work that he did on his own time and on his own dime, and that created a relationship. And now he works for multiple companies of mine. Okay,
Yeah.
so that in this instance with Mike Geary, I got my foot in the door, and I said, "Hey, I also have a book of buy-in that I'm turning into an ebook. It's called Cheat to Lose Diet. The ebook's going to be called Cheat Your Way Thin. I would love to send you a hard copy of the actual book that was in the bookstores." So one of the things that these ebook guys back then valued was like people. Most ebook authors were people who couldn't figure out traditional publishing and they just
Yeah.
wrote their own stuff and then they learned marketing along the way, but they still always had a desire to really be like perceived as a real author,
Yeah.
right?
So having that
And
hard
right,
book makes a difference. Yeah.
right. So I said, "Hey, let me send you a copy." So he said, "Sure, here's my address." And maybe it was a God thing or whatever. He lived 10 minutes from me, okay, where I lived at. Literally.
Yeah.
I'm in Burlington, New Jersey. He's in Morristown, New Jersey. I was in Morristown all the time. There was a sports bar there called PJ Wellahan's, and I said, "Hey, you live 10 minutes from me. I'd love to meet and connect with you anyway, just to grab a beer. How about Thursday night? I'll meet you for a beer, and I'll hand you the book in person." And he said, "Yeah, that sounds cool. I'm not doing anything Thursday night." So we
Yeah.
met up at PJ's. We sat there and had a beer or two and an appetizer, and we were there. He spent like 2 hours with me. This
Yeah.
guy is a multimillionaire, and I'm just like
And
trying to fit.
you're
I'm
just Joel
just
at this
right. I'm
point.
just starting, trying to figure it out after church, after teaching. But yeah, like I was making 12 grand a month with this
Yeah.
thing. I was like just getting started. I'm like, all right. I'm still far ways from where I would love to be, but this is an amazing relationship for me. Next thing you know, he introduces me. He said, "Well, it's my friend Kareem's birthday in a couple weeks. I think you'd be great. We're all going up to New York City." He said, "My friend Isabel," which these are other people who are on my list already.
That are on the list.
It's like my friend Isabel is going to be going there, and Vince Del Monte is going to be driving down, and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to go. And because we're 10 minutes away, I drove with him up to New York City, which was about a
Yeah.
2.5 hour drive. Spent another 2.5 hours with Mike. Spent a whole evening and dinner and just in the city with all these other guys, and I started creating relationships. And I started doing the same thing. Hey, here's what I did for Mike. Do something similar for you. Here's how I can add value. Next thing you know, all these people on that list, I didn't get all 20 of them, but I got 18 out of 20.
Yeah.
Okay. Craig Ballantyne.
By bringing them value too.
Right. Craig Ballantyne at the time was a little bit tougher to get a hold of. And because it really, Craig is a tremendous friend of both of ours, right?
Yeah.
A coach to both of us. One of my best friends, he was in my wedding party. And he is somebody who I consider a lifelong friend. He's gone on vacations with me and my kids and everything, right? But at first, he was difficult to kind of get a hold with and connect with. I ended up hiring him as my coach because I started to make some money. I ended up hiring him as a coach to help me build my sales funnel for Cheat Your Way Thin. So I paid to play. And I did,
Yeah.
even though I was starting to make some money, I was actually paying off debt that I accumulated when I was spending on my book money. I had
Yeah.
$16,000 in credit card debt. So I was paying off my credit cards, and I didn't have much there. And I went and I spent a few grand to hire him as a coach, just to get my foot in the door with Craig. For some reason, Craig took like a strong liking to me.
Yeah.
Which he was, we all know Craig is a much different person than he was 12 years ago. But at the time, he was very antisocial. So, he was very antisocial when it came to like really having close relationships and friendships. He was a good business coach, but he just kept it was really all business, right? And if it was transactional, then that was fine. He'd show up to the meeting, he'd provide what he said he was going to provide, but that was it, right? There was no
Yeah.
friendship after that. But for whatever reason, I think I was able to like start to de-shell Craig. So I got in with him. He helped me launch the book. It was funny because I was paying him $3,000 to help me launch it. I had everyone else in the entire industry who was going to promote the launch, and he's right before we're about to launch, he said, "I'm going to pass on promoting. It's
And
not for
he's
my."
he's the one that you're paying.
Right, yeah. I'm like, "Can I count on you to promote?" I'm like, "This is really the only reason why I'm paying you is because you were very difficult to get a hold of, and the only reason why I'm paying you is because, sure, I wanted some help with the coaching, but really I wanted you to promote, and that would end up
Yeah.
paying for the $3,000 and then some." But he said, "I'm going to take a pass on it," and then he ended up when he saw what happened on day one, he
Yeah.
ended up jumping in and promoting it. But so we launched that. The whole industry that I had become friends with, and I did it by adding value. It wasn't sure. There were some stars that aligned with me to Mike Geary
Yeah.
living 10 minutes from me, and I took the breaks that I got. But man, I had to nurture those relationships. You hear the story of our friend Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's and Dwayne Wade's trainer, okay, and
Yeah.
many other all-star athletes. But he got his reputation by training Michael Jordan, and then the Kobe's wanted him, and then Dwayne Wade's wanted him, right? But people were like, "Oh yeah, you trained the greatest of all time, the greatest athlete of all time. You caught the biggest break in the world." Well, if he showed up and he sucked as a trainer, he would have been fired immediately,
He's not getting
right?
the opportunity. Yeah.
Right. You got a chance, but if you didn't capitalize on that opportunity, you would have been out the door quicker than you came in.
Yeah.
So when I hear stories like that and people say that, look, you're going to catch some breaks along the way, but you have to maximize the opportunities that you receive. With Mike, I had a break. I caught a break with his proximity to me, and then him inviting me to that dinner. And these things, if you put in enough time, these things will surely start to happen for you. You can't just put in tons of work over and over and over again, and then over a 10 years period, nothing lines up. Something will line up eventually. You got to capitalize.
At some point, the stone is going to break if you
Right.
keep striking it. Yeah.
Exactly. So we launched the ebook, and we sold it as a $47 ebook with a $97 upsell version. Deluxe package was $97, and it was a pre-checkout upsell. They didn't have one-click upsells at the time.
Yeah.
They didn't even exist. So you basically showed somebody an offer. They clicked to say I want it, and then you go to the next page and said, "Hey, not so fast. I actually have a way better offer for you. If you want to continue with your regular order, the link's below. But listen to this, right?" So we had like 30 or 35% of the people who upgraded to deluxe. The rest of the people stuck with the $47 package. The average order value on the funnel was maybe $60 or something like that.
Yeah.
And all the affiliates, it converted really well. All the affiliates were making really good money. It ended up because I had so many people promoting it at the same time, and no one had organized that kind of launch in the fitness space at the time. It was bananas. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember we launched. It was launch day, and I logged into my ClickBAIT. I had so much anxiety going into it because I didn't know how I was going to do. I knew all these people were mailing. I had all my ducks in a row, but then I woke up the next morning. I think I went to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It started at midnight. I didn't even check my ClickBank account between 12 and going to bed. I was like, I'll just check it in the morning. I woke up probably around like 9 a.m. I called out sick at work because
Yeah.
there was like way too much going on. So I was like, I need to be here for this. And I logged in my ClickBank account, and it said, I didn't know how ClickBank works, right? Because you're paying commissions to affiliates and all that. So I log in, and it's like 10 a.m. and there's $25,000 in my account. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm like, let me call ClickBank because I think I still got to pay the 75% commission on this,
Yeah.
right? So, but even then, I'm like, man, I'm doing pretty good. I made like $6,000 already, right? So I call ClickBank. I was like, hi, this is my first time, promoting something on your platform. This is my first day of sales, actually. I said, I logged in and I see $25,000 here. I'm like, do I still got to pay my affiliates out of that? And it's like a general customer service rep at ClickBank. And so I'm like, do I still got to pay my affiliates out of that? Or is that like my portion? She's like, oh no,
Yeah.
honey. She's like, oh no, honey, you're doing great. She's like, that's all yours. The commissions come out and they go into the affiliates account automatically. That's the beauty of ClickBank. I'm like, oh, holy crap! I'm like, it's 9 a.m. I already made 25 grand.
Yeah.
So by all was said and done in the 3-day promo, it was a 3-day launch. I made over $100,000, which was the same thing that I made from my book, which was paid out very slowly over these different phases of a book. You get $33,000 up front, $33,000 when the manuscript is approved, and another 33 when it gets published, and that's a 1.5-year process. Here I made in 3 days what I made on the book in a 1.5 years,
Yeah.
and now I said, I got all these customers and I know what to do with them, and I have an email list and I understand email marketing, and this is not going to be the last $100,000 that I see like
I
it
can
was with the
actually
book.
do something with this now.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, now it's game time. Now it's like this is $100,000 I'm going to very quickly turn into 200 to 300, whatever. So my whole goal when doing this ebook was that if I can get my income through this ebook plus the coaching to 20 grand a month, 20 grand a month, that was like my first initial ceiling, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
if I can get to 20 grand a month, I'm good. Like that's 5 times what I was making as a teacher, and I'm making over 200 grand a year, which I associated with doctors and lawyers, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I'm like,
I'm making
right,
doctor money. Yeah.
right. I'm like, I'm freaking making bank. So
Hmm.
then I made 100 and some $1,000 in 3 days. Then I had to recalibrate what was possible for me, right?
Right.
Next thing you know, before the end of the year, I'm making on autopilot. Launch was in April, and then in the fall, I was making 50, 60 grand a month just from my email list.
Right.
And then the next year, I was making 100 grand a month, and then I graduated from there. And then we started the supplement company. And, well, the backstory of the supplement company is because I became known as the launch guy in health and fitness for ebooks. Uh, Everyone who's coming out with a new product or trying to break into the industry or even establish in the industry and wanted to run a big launch was contacting me to partner with them on launch.
Yeah.
So I met a guy named Josh Bazzoni, who we ended up partnering on an ebook. It was a referral from my buddy Rob Poulos. He said, hey, this guy is doing big things, spent like $300,000 on infomercials. He comes from the EAS and Bill Phillips, who you're very familiar with. He is looking to take his book that they did an infomercial on and make it to an ebook and launch it on ClickBank. So we ended up connecting. We agreed to do a partnership on the launch. We launched 7-Day Belly Blast Diet was the name of the product, and we did over $1 million in gross revenue, not take home. I think it was $400,000 in the ClickBank account,
Yeah.
from Josh's ClickBank account, but over $1 million gross revenue in less than a week. Now, my first launch did 370,000. My next launch after that did 600 and something thousand. That was right when one-click upsells became available with my friend John Romanello that I partner with. Then I launched my next product called Extreme Fat Loss Diet. Here's Extreme Fat Loss Diet backstory. There's like so much stuff. I just want to show you guys that just because somebody tells you no, that it's not going to work, or whatever, like that does not dictate whether that's reality or not.
Yeah.
So I got my whole cheat to lose diet bombed, and then I turned it into a multi-million-dollar
Ebook.
revenue stream for me, right? And then Extreme Fat Loss Diet was a 25-day rapid fat loss program. It was kind of crazy the way that I set it up. These 5-day cycles that had cheat days and fast days, and like it was kind of all over the place. And I had submitted the article like maybe a year before that to Men's Health, to Lou Schuler, who ended up referring me to my agent, so I can't knock him too much, or at least gave me the name. But Lou said, this is the most ridiculous program I've ever seen. There's literally no one in the world that's going to do this. That's what he said. All right. There's
Yeah.
literally no one in the world that's going to do this. And he said, no, we're not interested in publishing it at Men's Health. So I said,
Yeah.
okay. Um, I knew it was a good idea though, because people want to lose weight really fast. 25 pounds, 25 days. Everyone will be on board with that. I don't care what Lou Schuller thinks about it. I'm gonna make
Yeah.
that my next ebook after Cheat Your Way Thin, and then my buddy's product that I partnered on. We did extreme fat loss diet. It was the first we did 370,000, then like 600,000 with John's product, and then the first ever ClickBank ebook launch to do over $1 million was Extreme Fat Loss
Yeah.
Diet. The, this is the one that an editor, a very prestigious editor of a magazine, told me literally no one will ever do this
No one
program.
ever.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I sold $1 million worth of it in 3 days.
Yeah.
And then we relaunched that product every year for 3 years straight, and we did over $1 million every single time. Now, I launched this thing with Josh Bozzoni. We did $1.2 million on that launch. And then he came to me about a year later, and we just we kept in contact. He was a business friend of mine. And we weren't in business together other than that, 1 week launch that we did. And he came to me, and we would cross promote each other's stuff. And he came to me about a year later and said, "Hey, I want to get back into supplements because this whole ebook thing is cool, but supplements is where it's really at. Someone will buy 3 bottles at a time instead of 1 ebook, and then they'll come back and they're going to run out because it's consumable.
And they'll keep going.
Then they'll keep buying it over and over again." He's like, "It's way better." He said, "Plus you can build a company with equity value in it." And I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, he's like, "Where you can actually sell the business." And that was so foreign to me. I was just like, "Man, I'm a solopreneur here. Like, I'm still writing, like, I'm editing HTML code on my webpage.
Yeah.
Still, I have no team, me and 1 part-time customer service. It was great for profits, but I was still working all the time." And he's like, "No," he's like, "I have a team that can help, and I know people in the industry." He's like, "I just want you to run the marketing, and I'll handle all the formulations and all the, the actual operation side of the business."
The delivery.
So I thought about it, and I said, "All right, well, let's go," because I always wanted to own a supplement company. I'm writing for these magazines that are associated with supplement companies, Bill Phillips, Body for Life, and EAS. And I'm like, "That's your background." EAS was the coolest thing going. They had all these athletes that were representing the brand and all that. I'm like, "All right, let's do it." So started this company called BioTrust. And as you mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, that is the company that we went from 0 to $100 million in our first full year in business, and pretty much shocked the world of what was possible on how you could grow a company as quickly as we did. One of the fastest growing startups of all time in our category.
Yeah.
And now over $600 million in sales later, maybe 700 million. I haven't checked the actual numbers in a little bit, but but you can see where my journey came from. You can see from people like Jamie Lima, and you can see from Zander's story that like everyone started somewhere, had a bunch of obstacles and setbacks in the beginning. They chose to continue to press on and try to figure it out. At some point, they caught a breakthrough, caught some momentum. Then the ball started rolling down the hill faster. And now here we are today, right? And we have these success stories where people are like, "Dude, I could never do that. I could never achieve that. $600 million in sales, that's crazy. Like, that's just so far away from anything I could ever accomplish." Could you accomplish being a health and physical education teacher, making $42,000 a year? Could you accomplish getting 1 article published? Could you accomplish then moving on to getting 10 articles published? Could you accomplish getting rejected by all these agents and finally getting a book deal, and then the book flopped? Could you accomplish that? Like these are not big wins, right? There's some small
this is
wins.
the not fun side of
Right.
like success. This is all the crap that we all have to go through.
And then the momentum kicks in, and things can start taking off pretty quickly. Once I launched my first ebook, I made $700,000 net that first year. So my income literally went from $42,000 as a teacher to
700K.
700K my first year. The next year I made well over $1 million.
Yeah.
And then I worked my ebook business up to doing 10 million a year gross, and my take home was like $3.5-4 million bucks. I'm like, I used to make 40 grand a year, like, and I had to, all these things that I just kept going to find, ultimately success.
You talked about the law of latent potential and like how much work you had to put into that for 3-4 years before it it actually happened. And then you crack that, that ceiling, and all of a sudden everything changes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are there, who may be listening to this podcast and maybe they got turned on to personal development. They stumbled upon, Shit You Don't Learn in College podcast and maybe some other ones. And they're excited about the future and what could be possible for their life. And right. And then they go and try some stuff and they're like, man, that's a bunch of crap all these guys are talking about. Like, I've been doing this for 3 months and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And it's going to be that way. It's going to be that way. You have to refine your crafts. You got to make connections. You got to get your foot in the door. You got to create relationships. You have to find ways to get connected. One of the fastest ways that I can tell you to get connected to people, if you have the opportunity, if you heard of a mastermind group, and I'm not saying my mastermind group, but any mastermind group,
If you
where
can
you,
join Joel's mastermind
yeah,
group, I'm in it. It's phenomenal.
well, that's also at a price point that's cost prohibitive for anyone who's just starting,
For
right?
a
So,
lot of people,
right.
yes.
So, I mean, that's $100,000 a year group. Xander is one of our members, and we have amazing people who are in the group, as well as loads of instructors that are all running 9-figure businesses. But
Yeah.
I started by investing in coaching and with Craig, and that was I invited to a live event. It was a small mastermind, okay,
Yeah.
and then I upgraded to an annual mastermind later. That was I think $15,000 a year thing, and then since then I've invested so much in coaching and masterminds because it's the fastest way to buy speed to success because you're getting connected with people who can
And
help solve
proximity.
problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Proximity. You're putting yourself.
Proximity to people who can like. Fortunately, I got that relationship with Mike Geary who really fast tracked me. But if I would have paid to be in a group that Mike Geary was in, I could have got that relationship that way. And you saw what that did for me in my career, right?
Yeah.
I would have easily paid for that. But that's a story in which I didn't happen to pay. It was happened to be somewhat of a luck thing.
And I
But
think, but regardless of whether you're paying or you're giving someone your time or something, you're finding
right.
ways to give value, and you're
To
finding ways to.
connect, how am I going to connect? And the easiest way, quite frankly, is to pay for it. It's like, hey, there's somebody that I want to connect with. I know they're in a certain group, or they'll be at a certain event. And sometimes it's just going to an event and then finding ways to get together with them in person, wow them in some way. With my friend John Rowland has a company called Giftology, the Giftology Group. And he uses over-the-top gifts to get people's attention sometimes to create relationships. And people go from having zero relationship with somebody to literally melting their face off to where they're in tears from this magnificent emotional gift that they received. And next thing you know, that creates a friendship, a bond that then they get to know the person as long as you're not a complete douche. Like you have your foot in the door of a relationship that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to create. So there's lots of different ways
I
to
think
get
of
your foot in the door.
As you're going through this story, 3 people that were pivotal for me starting out. One was actually John Romanello.
Mm-hmm.
I paid to be in his mastermind, and then I got connected to Craig through that. And then with Craig, he needed a writer for Early to Rise, so I went and did some free writing for him for Early to Rise. So I contributed my work. And then the third one being Jack Canfield. I literally just reached out, kind of like how you reached out to Mike Geary, and just offered my time. I said, I just quit my job. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can I come help you guys?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it took. The next day I had a flight out to Arizona to go support. But the 3 ways to just make sure you have proximity, like commit your time, commit your money, commit your skills, whatever you can do to get that proximity. And I think I hear that throughout your entire story over and over again.
The fastest way to leap, you don't have to have a 3-year story of nothing happening. You can skip a lot of that by just getting proximity to people who can fast track, where you want to go, give you advice, teach you how to do things. I didn't even become open to the idea of ebooks until I had failed a bunch of other stuff. And then finally, and that was I just stumbled upon that. But if I was in a group where someone said, look, I have a passion for health and fitness. I want to be an author. I'm trying to get a book published. Someone would probably say, hey, I got a better idea. Why don't you self-publish? There's a platform called ClickBank. Skip that traditional stuff. You're going to make $3 a book, sell it for $47 a pop. pay affiliates, and even after your 75% commission, you're going to be making $15
Yeah.
a unit, you
You
know?
make money, they make money, everybody's happier.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I wish I would have got that advice a long time before that, as I would have went that route instead of wasting 2 years on a book that didn't end up working. But it's part of my story, and I can help other people by doing podcasts like this, share my experiences and what worked for me and what didn't work for me. But hopefully you can listen to this and, skip some of that, get involved, get proximity, like Zander said. And there's 3 easy ways to do it, right? Not easy, but 3 ways to do it.
Yeah.
Give your time, pony up some cash and pay for proximity, or donate your skills.
Yeah. I love it, man. So I just want to be respectful of your time, but a couple of quick questions I do want to dig into before we let you go.
Sure.
The first one, obviously, you have the successful business Born to Impact, or sorry, you have the successful business BioTrust, yet, a couple of years ago, you launched your personal brand and Born to Impact, the podcast, and really focusing on helping people with purpose and living their best life.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just explain to me why you went down that path and the importance of that for you?
Yeah, for me, it was really a God thing. God got my attention with a very challenging year that I had in 2017, in my business and personal life. Started in the business, ended up leaking into my personal life.
Yeah.
And I kind of hit rock bottom, honestly. You say, how in the world are you running a $100 million supplement company and you're at rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, I don't know if this is a shock to anybody. Money doesn't fix all of your
right.
problems.
In fact, it creates a lot of new problems and a lot of new stress
Yeah.
if you don't keep things in check. I was working insane hours. In 2016, we attempted to sell the company,
Yeah.
BioTrust, and unsuccessfully. Okay, for various reasons. And in order to hit the budget that we had put out there, because they wanted us, when investors are looking at your company, you have to be hitting your budget, your projections,
Yeah.
because they're not only buying you based on what you're doing right now, they're buying you on the believability that you're going to do, that you're going to hit your forecast for the next year, and the next year after that. And if you can't even hit your forecast for the year that's happening, they're not going to believe anything that you're saying
Yeah.
about the
They're
future.
not trusting you anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had to hit the budget, and it was quite frankly a very unrealistic budget. And but like, hey, we're going to get paid on this if we can grind it out and hit these numbers. And I was the guy, for the most part, who was responsible for bringing in the revenue. And I got real creative, and I figured out, and we had yeah, the year before we did 12 million in profit. Okay, the following year the budget was 20 million. And I'm like, oh, so we're gonna go from 12 to 20, like in 1 year, so how's that supposed to happen? And they're like, well, Joel, you got this. So I figured it out, opened up new channels, finagled over with the emails, but literally I was a slave to the business that year.
Yeah.
I would travel around with my laptop because iPhones can do everything that they could do, and I needed a bigger screen. But I would travel around with my laptop wherever I was. Literally, go pick my kids up from school. I had my laptop with me. If they're playing on the playground, I had my laptop with me, and I would get a report every 2 hours on our daily revenue, where our daily revenue was at. And we had to make, I don't know what it was, like 300 grand a day. And if it was lunchtime and we weren't at 200 or so by then, because there's only so many more waking hours that were left, then I had to make pivots. I'm like, oh crap, we're only at 130 grand. I'm 70 grand off. What do I got to do? Well, let me make some phone calls. Let me try and negotiate some deals with affiliates to get an email out. Hey, I'll pay you double if you can.
Whatever you needed
Right.
to do to hit those
Yeah.
numbers.
Let me queue up some more emails to our internal email list, and that was my life for like a year. Then we were unsuccessful at selling the business. Me and my partner Josh Bazzoni, who we were very close, ended up for about a year just kind of being at odds with each other. We had a falling out basically because hey, it's like you're crushing it. You're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You're on the 1 yard line, and then you can't connect on that pass, and you lose the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone starts blaming each other. You didn't line up on the line correctly. If you threw the ball, that wasn't a good pass.
6
Whatever.
inches higher. Yeah.
Right. And then everyone is calling each other, an a-hole, and next thing you know, my relationship with my partner wasn't very good, and through that, ended up leaking into the 2016 year with me being so busy. End up leaking into my family life and causing some difficulties at home. And then I was arguing with my partner and everything. And finally, I hit rock bottom, and I just had this moment where I felt like God was talking to me and saying, "Listen, what's happening in your life right now is not by mistake. And if you don't wake up and change some
Yeah.
things, you know, this could be the end of the story. But there's a potential to turn this around. And here's what you're missing. What I was missing was, as a kid, I was always told that I had higher purpose. I was going to really reach people. I grew up in a Christian home, Christian school, and in our belief system, we believe that this life is a relatively short life, but there's a much longer component of spirituality that happens after this. And I was impacting people for this temporal life, but I wasn't doing anything to really impact people beyond that.
Yeah.
How was I introducing people and having eternal impact by helping people further their relationship with God, which I wasn't. I mean, it was part of my personal belief system, but
Yeah.
it was never anything that I interjected into the business. And here I am when I was a kid being told, "Hey, Joel, you're going to be a trumpeter for the kingdom of God and all this stuff." And I'm like, all right, so I guess I'm destined to be either a pastor, a missionary, or an evangelist, right? A traveling evangelist, a missionary who
Yeah.
helps needy people, or I'm going to be a pastor of a church. And then when it came time to like college and stuff, I didn't really feel like I was being led down that path. So I was like, I guess all those people were wrong, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just do what I feel inclined to do, which was health and fitness. That was my passion. I totally missed the boat that, hey, you can be in health and fitness and you can actually be living a life that's an example of like how Christ lived his life in the Bible. You can get people's attention through your actions, through your leadership, through you got millions of people on the other side of all these emails you're
Yeah.
broadcasting. How about uplifting people, giving them messages of hope, instead of just selling supplements every single time an email goes out. So I finally just said, man, I really feel like I've been squandering all these gifts that I've been given and not using them to their fullest potential for what really matters most.
Yeah.
And that was my wake up call. The very first thing I actually did about that, and I was very apprehensive about doing it, was I wrote a newsletter about miracles. And normally we send out stuff about 5 foods for a flat belly. So like miracles is kind of an odd topic for me to be writing about. But it
Yeah.
was very personal. It was about what was going on in my life over the last year and a half, about how God was currently working out what seemed to be a very grim situation at home and in my business, and was doing a modern day miracle. And I said, it may not be parting the Red Sea or turning water into wine, but I still believe that God is a God who performs miracles today, and he's there. How do you give God room to do a miracle in your life? And it was kind of a 3-step process. The first one was you got to surrender. You have to realize that you can't handle this in your own strength. If you're going through a dire situation, you need support, right? And God sometimes will use other human beings as that support and as those messengers. And sometimes he'll step in and intervene and move the chess pieces of your life around only because you said, God, I can't deal with this. Like, help me.
Help.
And then next thing you know, things start to happen. And I can say a dozen times where that has happened for me, where I was like so stressed out, trying to deal with it myself, trying to figure it out. We make no progress. And then finally, like God's just like waiting off in the rafters saying, at some point he'll remember that I'm here. And it's like you got Michael Jordan and he's on the bench,
He's like,
right?
you're gonna pass me the ball?
Right, yeah.
Are you gonna pass it?
Yeah, right. Jordan's either on the court, you're not giving him the rock, or he's on the bench, and you're like getting blown out, and there's Jordan / God over there, and you're like, hey, I can't win this game. Can you come in too and like
Put him
help us
in.
out? Right, yeah. So many times, finally, when I just kind of took the blinders off and stopped relying on my own strength to do it, and tapped into this amazing resource that I have in God, I would see situations turn around very quickly. So we sent this newsletter out about miracles. We said, if you're going through a dire situation, and I spoke to things that like really some emotional stuff that people could be dealing with, like Maybe you're battling with a really difficult financial situation, a loss, untimely loss of a job, that's causing stress not only financially but in your home. Maybe you're getting ready to lose your home. Maybe it's you're getting ready to lose your marriage. Maybe there's a son or a daughter that is going down the wrong path, different from what you raised them to be, and it's causing you stress and anxiety that's on your heart. Maybe it's you know a terminal diagnosis or chronic health issues, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I said, here's how it has happened in my life where I've given God an opportunity to step in. Where we said, hey, Michael, why don't you come in and help us score a few baskets here?
Yeah.
And I kind of just put that out there. And then at the end of the email, I said, listen, this is a different type of email. I don't know how it's going to land. I don't know how it's going to resonate with people, but I felt it was important that I put it out there. And if you happen to be going through something, regardless of your belief system, whether you share the same beliefs that I do, but what can it hurt, right? If you can hit reply, share as much or as little of the situation as you want. If you wouldn't mind somebody from our team praying with you, right? Just
Yeah.
over email. We had 20 times the response to that newsletter than any other newsletter about foods or nutrition that we've sent out
Wow.
historically. That's when God opened my eyes and said, it was like, like, told you.
You paying attention, Joel? Like you
Right.
watching?
Like, you
Yeah.
see this, right? And from there, I started doing one of those newsletters every Friday. We had a spiritual, faith-based newsletter when we talked about big topics like depression and anxiety and your thought life and beliefs, your belief system, and limiting beliefs, and being willing to do whatever, perseverance, and being willing to do whatever it takes, and forgiveness and all kinds of stuff, And the response again and again every week, that was the most popular newsletter. So I'm like, I got to get this type of content onto these other platforms, because email, as good as it has been to me, it's a very one-sided
Yeah.
conversation, right? It's me broadcasting, and then people can reply back, but it goes to help desk or whatever.
Not so often. And
There's no interactivity to it. So I'm like, social media, it's all public. So if people saw these comments that were coming in from these newsletters, like, this could be a game changer, right?
More people would engage. Yeah.
Yeah, more and more people, they would see the stories, and the people were like, well, this blessed me, this changed my life. Here's a story that happened. We sent out an email about forgiveness, and like a week and a half later, a lady, and we get these types of stories all the time. I mean, it was like dozens and dozens that would get forwarded to me, but this is just one example where a lady emailed and said, I want to thank you so much for your email that came through on forgiveness, because I have not spoken to my daughter for over 10 years because of something that happened, and we fell out of touch, and it has grieved me ever since, but neither one of us were able to swallow our pride enough to try and reconnect. She said, your email came across at the perfect time. I decided to call my daughter for the first time in over a decade, and I want to let you know that me and my daughter just had lunch last weekend, and we forgave each other, And it was honestly just like one of the most beautiful things that could have. Listen, I send an email and make $100,000, right? But like, I send an email and have that kind of impact in somebody's life.
Yeah, right. That one thing is worth the millions that were made elsewhere.
We sent our email out about depression, and the guy, because I just shared some of my stories. So I'm like, yeah, I'm running a $100 million company, and guess what? I still struggle with depression sometimes, right? And I just put myself out there, and a guy responded back, and we had a lot of powerful responses to this newsletter, but this one was like 2 sentences, and it was very short. It's kind of written in like shorthand, the where the letter U was replaced the word U and whatever, like that type of stuff. But somebody wrote back and said, thank you, bro. I appreciate you, bro. I was just sitting here thinking about taking my life, and now I just decided not to, And to have that type of response come in, where like literally just saved someone's life potentially, because you are being obedient to the higher purpose of what you're supposed to be doing. And that's real impact, and how are you, and there's nothing wrong with being in business and creating wealth. And we've done a lot of good things through our business because we're very, um,
Philanthropic.
philanthropy
Mhm.
philanthropy is a big part of what we do, and we are we've donated over 200 wishes through Make-A-Wish. We've fed over 500 kids, I mean 5 million kids through No Kid Hungry and Share Our Strength charities that we support, and those are great things. But again, I was missing the impact on people for the things that really matter, the big struggles in life, and giving people hope and giving people direction, and yeah, how to navigate some of these more challenging things
Yeah.
through a platform that was created on the backbone of free nutrition reports. But now, no, see, nobody would have signed up for a newsletter list that was going to send out devotionals. Does this
Yeah.
not? I mean, maybe if I was a pastor or something and people knew who I was and they were wanting to get devotionals from me, but these are people who are not church going people who are signing up for this, right? And I wouldn't even necessarily consider myself a church going person. I mean, I support a lot of ministries and churches, but me myself, like, I'm much more in tune with my personal relationship with God than I am about like being belonging to any one church.
Yeah. The
So
church or religious side of it. Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's more of there's I had another individual on my podcast, and who happens to not be the same faith as me, and we got into this discussion on religion. And he's like, he said, when we prayed in the beginning of the podcast, he said, Joel, I know you're very religious. I said, hold on, I'm not religious at all. He said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You prayed in the beginning of your podcast. And I said, listen, religion is killing what God really wants every people to be.
Religion is killing
Right.
spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, religion is traditional, it's ritualistic, it's rules, a set of do's and don'ts, versus I'm not pro religion at all. I'm pro relationship. I have a relationship with God. The person who created the universe, this beautiful world that I live in, as well as me as a unique individual, and I get to have a direct personal relationship with Him. I'm all about that. I'm not about set of rules and regulations and stand up, sit down, bow your head, kneel, stand, sing this hymn, right? Like that's not anywhere in the Bible. That's really not even part of it. I mean, sure, there were churches and stuff like that, but even the church back then was very evangelical with the Paul and these different disciples that were traveling all over just trying to spread the good news. So for me, like, I just wanted to show people that, look, listen, it's not a religious thing. It's about getting in tune with your own personal. You have an opportunity to have a relationship with God. So then, I I kind of brought some of these messages to Instagram, built that, and then over, as you mentioned earlier, 1.4 million followers, and the podcast launched. I said after I hit 1 million followers, I'm gonna launch a podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting at all, like that, like literally zero. I'm like a very successful marketer, but it was like starting at zero again. Like when I started to learn about ebooks, right? I was like, podcast, I didn't even know anything about it. All I know is that there are podcasts that you can listen to. I don't even know that I had listened to one for real, like I
Yeah.
didn't even ever went into my podcast app on my phone. I just knew it was like a big way to. I heard a lot of people who had these podcasts, so
I'm not.
like,
I'm not going to lie. Your podcast was actually one of the first podcasts I ever listened to because I just started listening to them and
right,
prepping for
yeah,
for these shows.
right, and I think a lot of podcast hosts probably like it's like, hey, I didn't start listening to podcasts until I actually thought about doing one myself, right? But
Yeah.
my friend Lewis House, who has a podcast called School of Greatness, is the individual who I called because he's a good friend of mine. Um, he's the guy. He knew about podcasting. He also knew about Instagram, and both things
Yeah.
that I didn't know anything about. I literally remember my first phone call with him. I'm like, Lewis, do you have time to chat? I want to get on social media. I don't even know anything about it. And he's like, you get on social media, right? It's not like a particular platform. Like
Yeah.
now, it's like, hey, can you teach me Clubhouse? It was just like,
You clearly did not
right,
know anything.
right, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, can you teach me social media, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you recommend, Facebook or Instagram? He's like, oh, Instagram is kind of way better than Facebook is at this point for people who are trying to be influencers. I said, okay, so let's go with Instagram. I said, I have the app. Let me pull it up because I downloaded the various social media apps. I'm like, walk me through like this. How do I do this? I'm like, I see some profiles that got this special color ring around the profile thing, and other ones don't. I'm like, are these like premium accounts versus non-premium? They're like, no, that's called your story. Like if you click on that, then that's like highlights from your day. It disappears after 24 hours. And then what's below it is your feed posts. And I'm like listening, taking notes, and
Yeah.
next
You're
to
having
you.
Lewis House like baby step you through
Right,
Instagram.
right. Yeah, yeah. I'm like learning what the circle around the profile image is. I knew literally nothing. Um, and then I just step by step, I learned that. I grew that. That's how I met my partner in the mastermind, Dan Fleischman, because Lewis introduced me to Dan, and Dan helped me grow my social media. And then that led to an opportunity. And this is the power of networking, guys. Lewis was a good friend of mine. We never did any direct business together. We just happened to be at a mastermind together at an event.
Yeah.
And a pre-day, they had a at my buddy Josh Bizzoni's event. They had a pre-day before the event started. The day before was a small, more intimate mastermind. Lewis at the time, and I love these stories. Lewis at the time, there was another female who was attending the conference. Her name was Jamie Eason. Jamie is a very well-known fitness model. She's been on like 150 different covers, right? But Jamie knew Lewis. She said, "Hey, a friend of mine, he just kind of got injured and was a pro athlete. He's trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life next. And I know he has a lot of potential. He's a great guy. He's sleeping on his sister's couch right now. There's no way he can afford to come to this event. But do you think?" She's like, "Trust me, I'm vouching for him." And Jamie was like a big deal, and she's super sweet.
Yeah.
So Josh said, "Sure, have him. He can come to the event, and even one better, he can come to the pre-day mastermind on the boat, right?"
Yeah.
So we met Lewis there, and then that started a friendship. And then Lewis started the School of Greatness podcast, and then he's one of the biggest podcasts out there. So well over 100 million downloads now, and that through Lewis, who I didn't ever do any business with, but I just knew him as a friend, was how I got on Instagram, how I got introduced to my partner with the mastermind, which that relationship ended up creating so many other investments that I've done and other things that through the relationships of that group have been monumental connections for me for my business. And it
Yeah.
started with back to Lewis House, who I never even directly did any business with. I've been on,
And it's interesting because like those tables turned in that situation. It's like, you guys are now like the Mike Geary was to you, just letting him come to this thing just because, somebody vouched for him. He seems like a good guy, like get his energy, get him there.
right.
Right.
Exactly. And that's the type of opportunities, and I think a lot of people who have lived both sides or lived at least on the side that I was where I caught a break. And I think Mike Geary, that's why he met me for a beer because
Yeah.
he was what
Somebody gave him a break at some point. Yeah.
Mike Geary, and I'll probably get it wrong, but like it's equally as geeky and nerdy. He was like a geologist or something like that, or some environmental scientist before working in a cubicle, and that's the job that he was at, making whatever the ceiling, what he was doing was like 90 grand a year. And he had a health and fitness passion. He was doing personal training on the side, and then he learned ebooks. And then next thing you know, he had this brain for paid media, and he blew up his business to millions and millions of dollars a year, now to over $100 million a year through all the businesses that he's involved in. But Mike remembers, I used to work in a cubicle, and here's a guy who's just starting out, and I wish I had somebody, or maybe he did have somebody who he caught a break with. And when remember, like I was a high school teacher, I'm like, it's not lost on me. Like, yes, I've accomplished quite a bit, and I'm proud of my journey. Like, I still got a long way to go in my mind, but it's not lost on me that I used to be a high school teacher, making $40,000 a year. That just was trying to get my foot in the door, and I had some people who helped me along the way. So, of course, when these other individuals who I get introduced to, who are approaching me in a similar manner that I approached for help, I'm like, okay, I see a little bit of me in that guy. And I think that he can be successful. One of them happens to be an individual who his name is Richard Yu. And Richard was a podcast listener of ours, and you may know Richard Zander.
Well, he's a fellow UCLA grad like me.
Okay,
so,
right.
I do know Richard.
And Richard was at our mastermind, not as a member, but on the staff, on the team, because I brought him in. But this is a guy who was a podcast listener of ours, And he reached out to me. He loved the podcast. It impacted him so much, and that he reached out to me for mentorship. He wanted me to mentor him so bad, and he reached out to me, and like 40 something times he DM'd me until I finally saw it because he was in a different folder. Until I saw it, and then I saw he had DM'd me constantly, like nice messages, spaced a few days apart every time, about, hey,
But
commenting,
persistent.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, commenting on some photo of my family or commenting on a podcast that released. Really enjoyed that episode. By the way, would love for you to mention me if there's any way that I can, add value to your life. Just tell me. I work for free. Blah blah blah. Next thing you knew, I was like 11:30 at night. One night, I saw his DM. Kind of caught up on all these messages he sent me. He's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. 11:30 at night. It was like 8:30 p.m. his time, and I DM'd it back. I'm like, hey, I really appreciate the support. Thanks for being a podcast listener. And he like immediately hit me right
Yeah.
back. Right.
This,
He
this
was
is
like,
DM what number? Like 170 or
right,
like
right. But like finally, I saw it, and yeah, and I just texted him back to say thank you. Thanks for taking the time and for being an avid listener of the podcast. I'm glad it's impacted your life. That's the whole point, born to impact. And he hit me right back. I was like, oh man, it's like I've never thought I'd imagine that I'd even hear from you. Like this is incredible.
yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, wow, this guy's starstruck by Joel Marion, which is funny to me because I don't. Everybody has imposter
Still a PE
syndrome.
teacher in your mind.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And no matter how much success you achieve, you're still going to deal with imposter syndrome to some degree. I get around people in random rooms that I don't think to this day that I feel like I belong in. But
Yeah.
you just show up, you do your best, and you try to provide value. And most of the time now, like I'm blown away by people's feedback of my contribution to rooms that I never even thought that I belonged in. Right. So,
Yeah.
so here's Richard. Fast forward, we end up going back and forth on DM for maybe 5 minutes, and then he was like, "What can I do to get mentored by you?" He's like, "I'll do anything, but in the right way, not like begging, but like,
Yeah.
like I could do this, I could do that, I could do that." He's like, "This summer, I need to do an internship for college anyway." He's like, "So this is perfect. I'll help you with the podcast." I'm like, "We don't really need any help with the podcast. I got a camera guy, but like, there's nothing else to do for the podcast."
Yeah.
And I said, honestly, I'm traveling half the summer. I said, my kids, we use summers to vacation because my kids are in school the rest of the year. So we go like literally out of the 12 weeks of summer, we're traveling six out of 12 weeks. I'm like, I don't have time to mentor you this summer. I said, but I do know a guy who I think might be interested. His name's Vince Del Monte. And it just so happens he has an event here in Clearwater, like starting in 2 days.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm speaking at the event. You can, if you want to come into town, you can meet me, and I can introduce you to Vince and see if there's maybe something that you might be able to do for him because he's building a mastermind group, and it's a successful one. So we went back and forth for a minute. I said, let me just call you. I said, what's your phone number, right? So he gave me his number. Next thing you know, I'm talking to the guy on the phone, right? And and I'm like, end up being to where the flight situation was not so that he could get there in time and some other obligation he had because it was a really short notice, but he was trying to do everything that he could. And then I said, listen, I'll just connect you with Vince anyway, and you can maybe attend his next event, what's in Canada, Vancouver, or something like that. So I connected him. He ended up being a great fit. He showed up, added tremendous value to Vince. He interned with him for the whole summer. That
Yep.
internship turned into a full-time position in operations at Vince's company. Vince was thrilled. He's like, dude, this guy Richard that you connected me with has been amazing for the business, and he's working for free. It's just like super dope. Thank you so much. So I added value to my long-term friend Vince, and this new kid who was showing up in the right way got to have a pretty epic connection. Next thing you know, he's in operations. He's making a couple $100,000 a year with Vince, and then he starts learning marketing himself and selling courses, and then he's got a YouTube course. He's probably on track to make 7 figures this year,
Yep.
all from being a UCLA student who was very persistent in reaching out to somebody who he viewed as a potential mentor. And I didn't even mentor him. I mean, I did from
Yeah.
afar through the podcast and through like a lot of conversations I ended up having with him. But like, I'm like, I cannot promise you an internship with me this summer. I have no bandwidth. But I connected him with Vince, and then Richard ended up becoming a friend of mine. And Richard just sent me a text, literally on my phone right here, maybe a week ago, that said, there's a picture of him in front of this mansion in Austin, Texas, where he said, I just want to let you know and update you. Every time I have like one of these moments in my life, I think this is all because of Joel Marion. And he's like, I just moved into this, what I would consider my dream home, with a couple of business friends here in Austin, Texas. And I couldn't be more excited. I couldn't be more grateful and thankful for, and listen, he did the work. I helped make some connections and all that, but he's the one who did the work, and he deserves it. And just like,
he took action, he reached
right,
out, he was persistent, all of those things. Yeah.
and why did I even, like, I'm sitting here, I'm a multi-millionaire. It's 11:30 at night, and I'm answering a DM, and I call the kid. You know what I mean? Like, why would I do that if I really thought I was like hot stuff? No, I remember back when I was teaching high school, and a Mike Geary, who was my idol, number one on ClickBank at the time, gave me the time of day and met me for a beer, and then invited me to a dinner and connected me with other people. So I'm like, this is going up the right way. I had a soft place in my heart because I saw a little bit of Joel Marion in him. And now look, and I just connected him to my financial advisor, and because he was asking me, Richard was asking me investment questions, and I said, Richard, I literally spend zero time. Stop asking me about stocks. I don't have any answers. I can tell you the guy that does all my financial stuff, and I make great returns, and I literally don't. I said I rarely even talk to the guy, but he's really good, But so I connect you. So I contacted Jim, my financial guy, and I said, listen, I got a kid. I said he's like 23 years old, and
Is that Jim Dew by any chance?
no, it's another Jim.
Okay.
A Jim that I've known for over a decade. We've been investing with him. He just does such a great job. I have no reason to move any new money, investable money I have, I just hand over to him.
Yeah.
His name, if this ends up going viral, his name is Jim DiNardo, and he works for Northwestern Mutual out of New York. Okay, and Bank of New York. So, I just said, Richard, I'm gonna connect you with Jim. Get on the phone with him. And I hit up Jim and I said, listen, this is probably a small account for you right now, but I'm telling you, I've seen this kid in action, and he's the next me, in some way, shape, or form. He's going to be doing some really big things. So I connected Jim, and I'm like, in 5 years from now, you're really going to thank me, that I connected you with this 23-year-old kid, because you're going to have a lot of investable cash, and you both are going to be making some good money together. So, I just wanted to help people who have that kind of same outlook that I had in the beginning. Let me show up, let me add value, let me not ask you for anything, but rather, how can I serve you? And if you can do that, you can get a hold of somebody like me. You can get a hold of somebody like Zander. You get a hold of somebody like some of these other guests that Zander has had on this show. A lot easier than you might think, especially in today's day and age with social media and how reachable. Now, Clubhouse, although I haven't really experimented with it yet, and I'm behind the times, but Clubhouse seems to be the even another level of connecting with people that wasn't available before. And now Instagram was one, but now you got like Elon Musk is in hosting rooms and Clubhouse and all this, and all these moguls, especially in the business world, where you can literally get in a room and have a conversation with somebody who you would think was uncontactable or unreachable.
Untouchable.
Right. I always tell people this. So I'll just kind of close on this. There is nobody, not one person out there, that is uncontactable or unreachable or untouchable. It doesn't exist, okay? There is some way to work your way into an individual's life. Maybe not Obama or something like that, but like pretty much anyone within reason, and it could be a celebrity. I mean, but without going all the way to the top of the president of the United States, and there's probably some way to do that too.
There's probably angles. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
Right, exactly.
Lot more work.
But when I had a list of people that I wanted to have on my podcast when I started. Right now, this is all new for me. I didn't do podcasts. I didn't know what a podcast was. I didn't know how to create a podcast, any of this. But I had all these people that were not health and fitness people. So I'm like, I know all the
Yeah.
top guys here, but I know no one over here, right? So I wanted to get these pastors, and right on top of my list was a guy named Stephen Furtick, and Stephen Furtick is probably, in my mind, the top guy when it comes to being a communicator. He's a pastor at a church called Elevation Church in North Carolina in Charlotte. They have over 30 campuses, uh, all over the United States and Canada, and they are just the leader in the contemporary church world. And Pastor Stephen, I think, is such a dynamic speaker. I mean, you can't listen to the guy without just being blown away. So gifted, so talented, and I didn't know him, and I knew no one who knew him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, I'm so far removed. How am I going to get my foot in the door of this? Well, I mean, long story short, I finagled my way through somebody in the lower level church by filling out a contact form, okay, and
Yeah.
then getting passed on to somebody else, and then getting passed on to somebody else, and then wouldn't you know, maybe a year later from my initial trying to get in contact, I'm sitting there at a John Mayer concert with Stephen Furtick. Okay, not because we just happened to be at the concert together, but because I asked him to go to the show with me, and we had dinner and went to John Mayer concert together with our
Yeah.
wives. Okay, and now Stephen is a great friend of mine, and we text back and forth and support each other and encourage each other all the time. So that was somebody who I had no way of getting into. And you may say, well, Joel, that's because you are who you are, and you have a bunch of things, great things that you could say about yourself when you're introducing yourself to somebody to get their attention. Tell me that with Mike Geary, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't. It's the
And it
same
still
thing with,
happened.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's all about you. How are you approaching people? How are you adding value? Don't come with your hand out asking for help. Come with your hand out asking, how can I give? How can I serve? And when you show up with that mentality and you show up with that intention, then some pretty remarkable things can happen, because almost everyone who is successful will say that's how they did it, and it will resonate with them, and they'll see a little bit of themselves in you.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot that we covered in this, and a lot of self-belief stuff, a lot of perseverance stuff, a lot of how to appropriately reach out and connect and network with people. There's so much value that we've discussed in this podcast, and Zander has given it such great color and context and helping us pull out the nuggets of the conversation. But I'm hoping that people leave this conversation inspired and encouraged that almost anything is possible.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can achieve things that you never thought were possible. And maybe you tried something and you gave up on it, but you only gave it 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. Okay, it's going to take longer than that most of the time. But if you want to fast track yourself, I will give you a shortcut, as I did before. Get involved, pay for speed, or add value to somebody, contribute to them. Time, money, or your skill set, as Zander said. There's 3 ways that you can get your foot in the door and pay for proximity in one of those. You can pay for with your time, you pay with your actual dollars, or you can pay with your skill set, which is also a time commitment as well. But if you can do that, you can fast track yourself to some pretty. Because if I met Mike Geary a lot sooner, which I could have done, probably through a group or going to an event or something like that, or even through social media, nowadays it's a lot easier, then I probably would have not had as long a road of getting to where I went. I still
Yeah.
got there, but it wouldn't have been as long of a road. So connections and networking can't speak to how critical that is for not only getting where you want to go, but getting there in a shorter period of time, which is always nice when you can do that.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I think you just like you mentioned, hit a lot of golden nuggets throughout this podcast. I think there's a lot of inspiration, a lot of really good insights. Where can people learn more about Joel Marion, about BioTrust? Keep those inspiration golden nuggets coming.
You can follow me on Instagram at Joel Marion. More importantly, listen to the podcast Born to Impact. It is really the most important thing that I'm doing in my mind, because it is about inspiring other people to live the life that they were born to live. So many people out there are living a life that is some lesser version of the life that they were born to live. Okay,
Yeah.
you were created and you were put on this earth not by mistake, Because when two people came together and formed a baby, God decided it was going to be you, uniquely you, okay? And it doesn't matter who your parents are, who it ended up being, whatever. It's God said that when these two people come together, I'm going to create this individual. And that individual is you. And you're here not by mistake, because he could have created somebody else, right? So you are here for a reason, and it's not just to survive life, it is to thrive. Unfortunately, most people never get out of survival and into thriving because of so many things. There's the limiting beliefs, the environment that they grew up in, what they think they can accomplish for what's reality, what they believe their potential to be versus what's reality, because they tried something and they gave up way too early. All these things. You would have never heard of Jamie Lima, and she never would have sold her company for $1 billion if she did what most people do when faced with her circumstances. She would have quit after probably a few months of that crap, right? And say, this is not meant to be. Or maybe I'll get back to it at some point, but let me just go back and do my day job. So there are success stories that stand out. But when you really look at how they got there, they have the same journey as you. They went through a lot of the same things and check yourself, and I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but they went through the same things you did. Only difference between you and them is you decided to quit and they didn't.
100%.
So it's time to get back on the horse and get going again. And that's what I want people who are listening to this podcast to be inspired to do. Hopefully this lit a fire under your butt that no, it's not impossible for you, that these guys who you hear about who are successful just wanted it more than you wanted it. And if you get back to it, you can actually achieve a lot more than you originally thought you could.
Yeah, I love that. And I didn't even feel like I needed a fire lit under my butt, but I definitely have one right now. So
Nice.
thanks a ton, Joel. I think this is gonna get a lot to our audience. But I really appreciate the time today, man. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure, and God bless everyone who listened.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel.
All right, buddy.